I think about emotions and feelings and stuff, too many people assume way too much about how human beings experience them, that it works the same way in any body. So I'm walking out here in a spot that I know, I love, I'm here at home, things are at least generally okay in my life right now. And I know that I'm in a relatively safe space, unless maybe a bear shows up unannounced from the woods or something. And I'm asking myself, what am I feeling in my body right now? And the honest answer is I genuinely just don't know. I can check all the usual places in my body, and things are usually about the same every time I do that. No matter what model or technique or thing I'm following, person I'm following, despite therapy and tons of work and certifications and everything, that's how it goes every single time. I'm just not sure. And the research actually has a name for part of this: interoceptive confusion. It's an unfortunate name. I don't like it, but that's what it is. And it refers to the gap, the space, whatever, between an emotion and a clear felt sensation in the body. And this thing shows up in about half of all autistic adults. And for a lot of us, that thing between what we feel emotionally and what we physically feel actually isn't all that strong. And for some of us, it's kind of missing almost altogether. Most regulation advice and the models and classes and therapists even out there, at least the ones I've encountered, assume that this thing is already there and working fine. So this episode covers two things. One, why the body and emotion link runs differently for a lot of us neurodivergent people. And two, what actually helps when you check in and you arrive at that sort of I don't know answer. By the end of this episode, you'll have something to do with that particular I don't know signal, other than reading it as some sort of personal failure or sense of shame. So let's go into the studio and learn something about this thing. So a lot of regulation and somatic work opens with some version of notice what you feel in your body right now, or where do you feel that in your body? This happens in therapy and mindfulness classes, and it's generally taught in a lot of certification spaces involving trauma. Somatic coaching and most of the books I've read and podcasts I listen to on this thing do it as well. I've heard practitioners just kind of drop a line on a podcast about where they feel an emotion in their body, like the location and the sensation, like it's obvious to everyone and that anybody could relate. But for a lot of neurodivergent people, that instruction or that reference just doesn't work. It doesn't resonate, might not make sense. So if you've watched the earlier episode on interoception and autism on this show, you might already know that interoception runs on a spectrum, and a lot of us have a different interoceptive profile, different experiences or varying strengths of response. So if this is your first episode on this topic, that's the short version, and I'll link to other resources in the description. Now, most of the conversation about interoceptive differences sits on a confusion piece. It's like feeling something, but not being able to tell what it is. And researchers have documented this experience pretty well. There's a second profile that I haven't found quite as much literature on. And this is the one where the signal, the interoceptive signal just kind of isn't that strong, or it might be absent altogether. So the emotional layer that is supposed to build on top of that sensation or that signal doesn't have a lot to work with. And this is the second one. That's what I want to get into, because that's the one I personally experience and I've been trying to sort out for a very long time. So if you're in this group with me, perhaps this or something like it might sound familiar to you. So someone might ask you where you feel something that you mention. Like you might say something about a crummy day because you lost all the videos you recorded for your B-roll for your podcast. And they ask, so where do you feel that in your body? And then you're going to sit there and you're going to kind of go scanning through. You're going to go looking. And every spot in your body is reporting back roughly the same thing, which is, I don't know, or nothing, or it's neutral. It's all just kind of neutral. Or you might only notice something literal, like your butt hurts because you've been sitting for a long time trying to retrieve those files somehow. So there's no like arrow that's just pointing at an answer or a spot. And the strange part is that you can be genuinely upset or thrilled or scared or some kind of emotion in that space that you don't have a label for, because those are really tough too, and you get the same neutral reading. For me, the whole thing just kind of kicks off this internal plinging around, checking and searching and all the spots, go into all those spots to see if maybe this time I can feel something somewhere. After an autistic meltdown, and sometimes even during one, if that isn't too extreme at least, I'll go looking for this thing because it's so strong. Where is this emotion? Where am I feeling this? What is the feeling? What is the emotion even? And still nothing is coming back. I know it's bad. And that's kind of where it starts and ends. Even afterward, I'm lying in the dark and quiet because that's a good place for me to go. There's usually just kind of nothing anywhere that I can pick out. Just the technical stuff. Like I might have a scratchy throat from the too loud sounds that I made during that meltdown. You know. So this connects to alexithymia, which generally refers to difficulty identifying and describing your own emotions, often as labels, like giving them a name, like terrified. The emotions are still there. It's just difficult to label or describe them. What is often weak or even missing is the link between the emotion and a felt body experience. So you can know on an intellectual level that you're angry or scared or something in that general realm of experience. Many of us give labels because you've just kind of been around emotions all your life and other people labeling them. So you just kind of give them a name. I don't know. That's what I tend to do a lot. But anyways, there's no clear physical sensation showing up for that emotion. So alexithymia is experienced in roughly half of autistic adults and somewhere between 20 to 40% of adults with ADHD. So if you've recognized yourself in what I'm describing so far, you're in a large group. There's a lot of us out there. A study from around a decade ago found that alexithymia, more than autism on its own, seems to be what drives the interoceptive differences. So this isn't autism or ADHD. It's not a trait or a thing in either of those neurotypes. What researchers accounted for alexithymia, autistic people without alexithymia showed typical interoceptive awareness. So the difference seems to point at alexithymia more than to autism. And it might be that the two are really often co-occurring. So co-occurring that they get kind of tangled up in how people talk about autism traits and people and such. So that whole myth that autistic people can't feel feelings or don't have emotions is really just kind of BS. And the same with alexithymia. Emotions and feelings are there. I want to emphasize that. You have emotions and feelings even if you're alexithymic.
So maybe this will kind of explain how the brain makes an emotion in the first place. So your brain builds emotions out of two ingredients. The interoceptive data is one of them, and that's coming up from your body and the context around you. No preformed feelings are just like kicking around, ready to fire on their own. Your brain takes all of this raw material, really, like the heart rate and the gut activity and the muscle tension and temperature, and then it sort of just all folds it into what it already knows about situations like that, and then it barfs out something that you experience as an emotion. Now let's follow that logic. Let's follow it into what I mentioned earlier about those faint signals. When the interoceptive data is pretty thin, it's barely there, the brain doesn't have a whole lot to build from in this situation. So you might get some kind of information in a really broad and high-level sense, like just kind of a very vague or unpleasant thing that doesn't quite resolve into a specific nameable emotion. So that's maybe why you might have trouble labeling things. Or the body component might not even register at all, and the emotion only reaches you once it's built up enough to kind of show up for you, usually at a much higher intensity than you may have wanted to deal with. Like the thing has to be really big in order to register. So for me, a clear body feeling is just rare enough that it can genuinely throw me like for a loop when it shows up. Before a major surgery, a very kind and aware nurse, she comforted me, and I felt this wave of calm or relief or something from that experience. And that body sensation was completely unfamiliar. So I was totally sure that somebody had definitely given me some kind of sedative. So I announced to her, I said, "Oh, whatever medication you gave me is actually kicking in. Thanks." And it took a lot of convincing from several people who work there, including the person that I'd brought with me, a trusted person, before I believed that nobody had even given me anything at all. And I was still unsure until I learned about somatics, and I remembered that experience and was able to kind of link the two things together. So the sensation that I got from that was so surreal to me. Somebody who has never experiences anything like that ever in my body, never something that clear or strong. So that's how unusual it is for my body to actually experience any interoceptive sensations. So researchers, which I'll link to, measured part of this, that in alexithymic people, interoceptive accuracy and sensibility can be normal or even raised. So the body might be sending plenty of signals, maybe even loud ones. What tends to kind of break apart is interoceptive awareness, which is that thing where what you detect and what you think can actually align. They can line up with each other. They found that the awareness measure sorted alexithymia correctly, more than 92% of the time. So the signal can be fully present at a physiological level. The catch is, though, the access, or that what you're kind of looking for when you're plinging around your body doesn't correspond to what's happening there. So a related idea from another study looked at the difference between how well you think you can read your body and how well you actually can read it. So in autistic adults, a bigger gap between those two things predicted more severe anxiety. So when your brain keeps expecting clear body data and keeps getting nothing useful back, that mismatch can become its own source of distress and dysregulation separately from whatever set it off. So me going and searching for that thing I couldn't do, anxiety and dysregulation, which really raises a question for me personally. Is it worth that distress? If you're intentionally looking for that information consciously, how is that going to serve you? Like when somebody asks you where you feel that in your body, when you intentionally try to read it and you get nothing. Anxiety, is it worth it? Anyway, if that sounds familiar, you're probably not imagining this thing. And you probably have a bunch of human beings who are like you, us, out there, or here at least in the studio. You got one at least. A 2024 study that I'll also adds one more thing about all of this. Alexithymia tracks with both that interoceptive confusion that I mentioned earlier and heightened interoceptive attention, which is a pattern of us humans potentially fixating on body signals without being able to kind of figure them out. All of that well-meaning advice to try harder to notice or interpret what you're feeling can make things worse for some of us. You can end up monitoring this thing that isn't giving you anything useful, and the monitoring itself turns into a fresh source of frustration and anxiety, which is often the opposite of what going to therapy or a mindfulness session or something similar is aiming for.
So if your experiences are like this and checking into your body or yourself is going to be part of how you want to regulate it, it can really help to start from just an easier question than something like, what emotion is this? Because that can be very challenging for people like us. Maybe you want to aim for something closer to, what can I actually discover or access right now, whatever that is. For a lot of us, body sensation is just one possible entry point among several. And on some days, or maybe every day, unless you're experiencing something extreme, it's a hard something to reach. So a wider list of possible things to try to access can help. Many people track the speed of things on the inside, like how fast or how slow your thoughts are moving. Or some people track the internal volume, like how loud or quiet are things in your head, or wherever that might be a thing for you. Some people check in on their focus or their energy level, or it could be a body sensation when that's reachable at least. External readouts can be used too. So if you have a smartwatch that shows your heart rate, say it's climbing, and you know what that means for you, that can also be a very valid indicator that you might want to track. How much you can even let yourself notice can get affected by other things around you. It can get affected by years of masking. It can get affected by code switching. You might not feel safe enough, for example, in a given room or a given context, to just drop your guard and check in on things. And I'm going to emphasize that it's not a personal failing at all. If any of this doesn't work for you, if you can't access it, using anything on this list is there for you to pick from, whatever can be available for you. And you can change what it is depending on the day or the context. Things like your capacity, or things like who you are or who you're with. And none of these have a fixed universal meaning, because the same signal reads differently from person to person. Like tired could be ease or comfort for one person, and it might mean shutdown for another person. Or a calm mental picture can be, say, settling for one person, and it might mean going into a freeze state for another person. Or appearing really activated might mean mental balance for someone, like me, or not for someone else. It might mean agitation or dysregulation. Personally, I look really activated or intense or stressed when I'm internally actually doing very well. These are positive things and good things for me. So the mapping is yours alone to discover and build out over time, over your own indicators to your own states using your own system.
So this is where the standard advice runs into a problem, I think, because these practices got built around a kind of interoception that a lot of us don't have. So the phrase, notice what emotion you feel in your body, or doing that tracking, asking you to do these things, or asking you to perform a capacity you might not have built yet, or you might not build at all. And the harder version, right? This is the one where someone tells you to really focus on the feeling. This thing can backfire, and more attention on this channel you can't actually use or find or decode tends to actually increase our frustration and anxiety or shame. Pushing harder on that same thing that you can't access isn't going to get you anywhere. And it's not progress, and it's not helpful, and it's not going to help you be mindful or to access anything. What does help is a change in what you are going for and what you're reaching for. And that's the rest of this episode. So the first thing to do is to sort the sensation before actually going for a name, or maybe even instead of reaching for some kind of emotional label. So in CRIM, the community resilience model, one of the skills that they use is tracking. I'll use this as an example. This activity is asking something a lot easier than like, what emotion is this thing? What is this feeling that you're feeling in your body? So you can opt to notice a sensation that's present right now in the moment. And it could be internal if you can access that, or it can be external, right? You're going to place that thing, that sensation that you notice, internal or external, in one of three buckets. That's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So you don't need an emotional label. You don't need to go inside your body, and neutral or none at all is always an acceptable thing to notice. So the reason this works for somebody who might just not have much of that signal is it goes right back to how emotions get built. So if you're asking for a finished emotion like terror, that was dramatic thing to choose. I don't know. Or demanding somebody find a sensation in their body at all is asking for like something that's resolved, a resolution and interpretation of your overall system. These things might not produce a cue or anything at all. So this can also be an issue for those experiencing pain in their body, because tracking and noticing could actually continually highlight this chronic pain. Even if they shift their attention, they do have to run into that pain, which isn't great. So choosing to stay with external markers can be helpful in this case as well. It's very inclusive. So you can always use external contact as a valid place to start this practice. So you can always use the warmth of a mug in your hand or the feet on the floor. You can use the texture of that floor on your feet, the texture of your chair or the arms of your chair. All of these things are things that you can use for tracking. And for anyone where these kind of internal sensations are really hard to read or figure out, these things from the outside in, these external things, are a lot more reliable. And this is the adjustment that I personally make to their model, is to always mention these interoceptive elements, the external things, as an option while you track. This is really important because continually asking for a neutral response, if you're interior or body tracking your body and everything is neutral, this is something that CRIM does by default, that can end up instilling that sense of shame. So I don't like to do that, don't personally enjoy it myself, which is why I always adjust the model personally to add that option in all tracking at all time. And then from there, if you are using the external elements and you want a little bit more detail of your internal sensations, the interoception, you can always start with really plain sensation words like warm or cool, tense, relaxed, or heavy or light or tight or soft. And those sort of things, those very easy entry points, can sometimes result in you being able to access your internal sensations from those very simple words, those simple sensations, and sometimes not. Sometimes not. So the second move that you can make for really maybe stressful days, or a lot where just everything seems like too loud or too much or something like that. Sometimes you can kind of fixate on things being too much. When that signal is too much and you can't read it as a result, and you're just kind of scanning things over and over and you're just not getting anything, it's all too confusing, you might want to try just looking at something a lot more concrete, right? Just take it back to the basics. You might want to ask yourself, have I eaten? Or have I had some water? Or do I need to move? Have I been sitting or resting for a very long time? Do I need to use the washroom or something? You might want to try noticing and addressing these very simple physical things first. Just check in with that before you spend a lot of time or a lot of effort or energy trying to interpret your feelings or interpret these very confusing sensations. So external data is very useful here. And this can also be from a smartwatch or a tracker. So you might use something like a heart rate readout or a sleep score. Or you might even just use, maybe you're taking manual notes and you notice that you haven't stood up in 3 hours. You haven't checked that off or whatever. All of these count. These are all very valid indicators. And this can be helpful if your internal sensations and stuff aren't very reliable, because some of us can actually regulate better when we have numbers, when we have data analysis. It might be on a screen or it might be on the paper or something. And all of this can be useful information. You might not have access to these things like a smart watch or something like that. And you might not want to for privacy reasons or cost reasons. And you can opt for that manual tracking that I just mentioned, like a journal. You might want to record these things or just record what you're able to notice. You might want to put your hand on your chest to do kind of a manual external check of your heart rate. You could just simply record fast or slow or whatever element you notice. A journal where you record your interpretation of your sleep quality when you wake up. You just put it right next to the bed, perhaps. That's something that you can access, and that's something you can use in this. And importantly, you don't need to depend on reading an emotion or a signal really accurately. And whatever the signal happens to be doing, you can come out of it either with a resolved need or a piece of data that you might be able to work with. This might be a pattern or a clue. It might be something that you can strategize around or build that system around. Now, rest is always a lot better than just trying to push through things until things are too much. That's when burnout and so on can happen, and we don't want that.
And remember that neutral or that I dunno answer is a real answer. And it's fine to set a boundary, to not dig into that I don't know if you don't want to, because there's that evidence I was talking about earlier that this thing digging in can lead directly to dysregulation. So you can always work with and count that answer that you don't know as information to use and work with as well. Understanding how your interoceptive system works is part one of things, but actually building a practice or a system that fits your specific way that your nervous system processes information is very individual work. And it's the part that no one episode here can do for you. So some of this also works a bit better with other people around you. Co-regulation can be really useful, which that is being in the virtual or in-person presence of someone else, which is part of what the coaching and workshops and virtual gatherings are for. So I have some low-cost options on my website, deHaan.com, or you might choose to go to just a coffee shop or a library or find a free body doubling exchange with other human beings, and they can be online as well. And there's another option. You can do a self-paced, asynchronous, guided audio episode on the podcast version of the show. It just walks you through some of these regulating practice that you can just follow along to on your own. It's free on the podcast version of Wired Divergent. There's a link in the description, and I really do believe, after being unemployed for a very long time, that these activities shouldn't depend on being able to afford support, which is why I put out those episodes for free. Sometimes I think back to the last time someone asked me to notice what
I was feeling in my body, and I came up with nothing yet again after many years of trying. And now I kind of know I can just step out. I can reject that shame and do something else instead for me. So I'm developing a system around that for myself, and I'm trying to share what I'm learning. It might be different later on as I discover more things one day, but at least for decades, it's been pretty much the way it is right now. Now, knowing that our nervous systems process emotional information on just a different wiring, different connections in our brain and everything, that might change what you do with that neutral or I don't know response the next time this question shows up for you. It did for me, and treating whatever you have just like plain old information to work with helps with that shame and that negative element, and that can be very regulating on its own, or whatever it might be. So that's it for this one. This is Wired Divergent, and I'm Jen deHaan. If you want support working through your own version of this, I run coaching and group programs for neurodivergent brains over at jendehaan.com at a very low foundation rate for now while I build up my hours towards full certification. The same site has a newsletter, has written versions of these episodes, and a pile of other resources that I'm building up. There are guided practice episodes on the podcast sitting alongside the main episodes. They're marked as regulation practice. And if you're listening on the podcast, all of this is on YouTube videos as well. Bye for now.